A variable ND filter, such as this Kase 2 to 5 stop ND variable filter, is a useful bit of kit to have in your kit bag. So let's explore 3 different reasons as to why it is you should have one of these in your kit bag, certainly if you're doing a lot of filming and time-lapse work, but as well a little bit of stills. So let's look at those 3 different scenarios in which you can use this variable ND filter. The first use of an ND filter, a variable ND filter, is to film. So what I'm going to be doing is filming some video footage in the street here in central Vietnam. Now ideally you want to be using the 180 rule, which means if I'm filming at 24 frames a second, I need a shutter speed of 1/50th, 1/60th of a second, something like that. So at the moment it's quite bright sunlight, so I need to get that the exposure right, and the variable ND is going to help me do just that. So I'm going to put on my 5D Mark IV and film, and probably get some people coming into camera and saying hello, xin chào, whatever, etc. So let's get on with that. When you do video footage, basically you want this to be on the 180 rule. So as I said, if you're filming as I am, this is at 24 frames a second on this 5D Mark IV. The shutter speed is at 160th of a second. I don't want it at 160th. I could stop down, but I don't want to stop down. The best way to get this to 1/50th of a second, because I'm at 24 frames a second, is basically to put on an ND filter. So with a variable ND, it gives me a bit more scope than just a regular ND of having fixed stops. So the Kase one that I'm going to use goes from 2 to 5 stops. So as I said, if I was to record this, and I'm going to, there will be maybe a little bit of staccato, you may not see it with the film footage, because it's going at the shutter speed is 160th of a second. So let's do some film footage with each one, the before and then the after. On the front of my camera I've put the variable ND, so as I said it goes from 2 to 5 stops. Look at the back of the camera now, you can see how much more darker it is. So it means that I can now increase the shutter speed. So let's get it up to 1/50th of a second. So you can see now it's a lot brighter again. If I wanted to, if I thought the sun's going to come out and then going to make the scene even brighter, then I can turn this here and you can see immediately what happens when I'm turning that ND filter. So there is 2 stops of light that's basically bringing that exposure into play there. So let's get it, open it up a little bit, just maybe there. No, let's leave it at f5.6, 1/60th. Actually no, let's bring it to 1/50th as I should be doing. f5.63 there, and then let's record. And hopefully what you'll see is the difference between something that's filmed at 24 frames a second, 1/50th of a second, against 24 frames a second, 160th of a second. So hopefully, like when people are going along here, etc., so you'll see there's some movement with people, it'll look a lot nicer. So for example, there's a lady just walking into frame there, so when she's walking away now, she's at 1/50th of a second, it should be a lot smoother. There's a bicycle going through the frame as well there, so it should all look a lot nicer, a lot smoother. And now the sun's coming out, so this is where, for example, it's become a lot brighter. So if I now increase that ND there, let's bring it there. So there you go, that's the wonders of the variable ND when you're doing footage here. So I could quickly dial in what I needed to instead of having to chop and change different ND filters. So let's go on to the next scenario as to what you can use your variable ND filter for. Another excellent use of a variable ND filter is when you're doing time-lapse sequences. So I've been waiting to get some really nice cloud, As you can see here, there's the nice cumulus cloud behind me up in the sky, and I thought, well, with the way the sun is coming and going behind the clouds, it's perfect to do time-lapse. But again, like when you're doing video footage, you easily want to have, for example, if you're filming at 24 frames a second, you want your shutter speed to be at least 1/50th of a second. So with the time-lapse, what I want to do is drag the shutter a little bit, so it's actually a shutter speed that's longer than 1/50th of a second, just to get some really nice motion in between the different frames when I'm doing the time-lapse. So I'll set it up and I'll show you and explain a little bit more of my thoughts in my head with regards to the variable ND in time-lapse photography. I've set up my shot for the time-lapse, so as I said, you can see there's that really nice cumulus cloud there. I know it's, as I've been watching it all morning, the cloud is coming this way, so the sea is actually that way, so it's a nice easterly breeze. And at the moment, on the back of the camera, you may or not be able to see, but I'm at f8, it's my default for doing time-lapse, and I've got 1/30th of a second. So that is actually pretty good for doing time-lapse, 1/30th of a second, but I personally would like it to be longer. So again, because I've got that variable ND, I can then darken it down really nicely, so I know actually it's clicked into place. So 5 stops. So what I'm going to do is just open up that exposure, look at the histogram on the back of my camera, 1/13th of a second, so it's allowing me to elongate the exposure. I'm just going to take a quick test shot, make sure nothing's blowing out. Look at the JPEG histogram on the back, everything's fine. So I'm actually going to set this going. As I said, I'm on f8 at the moment, 1/10th of a second, ISO 100, and I should get some really nice time-lapse actually, something I've been meaning to do this place for a long time. So kind of has a twofold benefit for me doing this tutorial. But let's get the time-lapse and show you the results of using this variable ND to do a nice time-lapse sequence. The third and final thing that I want to use this variable ND filter for is to do a little bit of panning in the streets here in central Vietnam. So what I want to do is, normally what you find is that there's people on bicycles or scooters going around with interesting loads, so I might have to wait a little bit just to get something. But basically what I want to do is get a slower shutter speed. I don't want a very small aperture, because in all of this actually, from the video footage to the time-lapse to the stills that I want to do, of course the smaller the aperture that you've got, the more chance it is that you're going to see dust on your sensor, and I know that there's a little bit of dust on the top of my sensor, which is irritating. So that's another benefit using this variable ND filter, is that I'm able to slow down the exposure without having a very small aperture. So what I'm going to do, as I said, is I'm going to take I've got my 5D Mark IV here, I've got a 2470 f2.8, and what I'm going to do is, as I said, I'm going to wait some interesting people, if I can, just to be going along the street, and then basically just pan that camera, keep them sharp while blurring the background while having a wide aperture. So as I said, I'm doing that just because I know that if I close the aperture down and make it say like f16 for example, to get a slower shutter speed, that what I'm going to do is have the potential to introduce some dust into the picture that's on the sensor. So let's go find a couple of people and then go from there. So there you go, there's 3 different uses for that variable ND filter. Thanks to Kase Filters for sending me the variable ND, which you've seen in this sequence here. So it's a 2 to 5 stop variable ND. They do 82mm thread, 77, I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. I've got the 82 because I'm using that the most. I don't know if it's available in their magnetic system, but it is a great filter. So there you go, hope you've enjoyed it. See you on the next vlog sometime, somewhere in this world, wherever it's going to be, I don't know. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you again soon, folks. Appreciate it. Goodbye.